welcome to video number 8. I guess this is session 4, video number 2. Anyway, we're going to make some sauerkraut in this video, and I'm also going to show you a cultured flour recipe for what I call sweet cultured coriander cornbread. And the benefit, I'm going to just say right away, the benefit of making your own sauerkraut is it's a probiotic. Okay, so I make my own because if I go to the health food store and get the refrigerated jar of sauerkraut that's about that big, it's $10. And if I make it myself, I can make a whole gallon glass jar full of it for about $10 with organic cabbage. So the probiotic factor, probiotics are so wonderful. It's the same in sauerkraut. It's the same beneficial probiotics that are also in yogurt. It's great to have those to help us in our digestion and assimilation, and actually a lot of other beneficial things that the probiotics do for us. They're finding now that they actually produce B12 in our intestines for us. So if you're vegetarian, you're getting your probiotics, you may not need as many animal products. Or it's a kind of a supplement for that B12. So what I've done here, you want to make sure you sterilize everything really well. So what I did was I took an antibacterial soap and then grapefruit seed extract. And I just, squeezed a few drops of the dish soap onto my fairly clean sponge, and then a few drops of the grapefruit seed extract. Grapefruit seed extract is a natural non-chemical microbial. Because we want the right bacterial balance going on in our jar of sauerkraut, we need to eradicate all the other bacteria to help ensure that right dance starts to happen. So if you have an antibacterial soap, that works, and if you don't, get a little grapefruit seed extract and squeeze it on your sponge while you're sterilizing everything. And I went ahead and sterilized, and I recommend you do too. Your cutting board, your knife, your stand-up grater, your bowl, and your jar that the sauerkraut is going to go in. After I mash this with a little yogurt whey and sea salt, we're going to let it sit for an hour to create more of a brine, because the sea salt will pull the liquid out of the cabbage. But I'm going to stuff it down into that jar after it sits for an hour in here, and we're going to get it underneath its own liquid. Okay, so oxygen is not good, but you'll let it sit on the countertop for maybe a week in the summertime. If your house is about 80 degrees, it happens in about a week, and you don't necessarily have to inoculate it with yogurt whey, but that helps get the process going on a little faster. This is just the clear liquid part that floats to the top of a plain cultured yogurt, and I poured it through a coffee filter to get the milk solids out of it. But we're gonna use that to really help our sauerkraut it helps it happen faster. It gets the process going faster. So maybe a week in the summer, maybe 3 weeks in the winter if it's like 60 degrees in your house. Maybe have it somewhere up high, maybe even over the stove, somewhere that stays warmer, and it'll happen faster. And what it'll look like is more of a green color at first, and then you'll see it over several days period of time. It'll start to turn more and more yellow, and you'll smell that classic sauerkraut smell. And it's wonderful. And there may be a little bit of mold that forms along the top around the rim of the bag where the water level is. And that's fine to just skim that off. When you're ready to harvest it and start eating it, you skim that little layer of mold off and dig right into it with a clean spoon. And then you transfer it to your fridge. And it'll keep in the fridge for about 2 months, just like your beet kvass. But you want to also try to press it down under its own liquid in the fridge as well, because it will continue to culture just at a much slower rate in the cold temperature. So I'm going to wash my hands again before I start mashing this kraut. So I'm going to use a little bit of this soap and a little bit of grapefruit seed extract, and I'm actually going to use a scrubber and get up under my fingernails too. So I got a scrubber here. The bacteria we do want and that we don't want are already in the air. So there is like about a 25% chance that your kraut will then not turn out in the way that we want it to. I've had, out of the 25 or 30 batches I've done over the last several years, maybe 6 or 7 that they did not turn out right. So what it was it smelled more like eggs or sulfur And when you taste it, there's a very bitter taste. So what they say is that the nose always knows. And if you've had sauerkraut, real live sauerkraut before, even the refrigerated pasteurized kind has that classic sour flavor and sauerkraut smell. It smells like fermented cabbage. The nose always knows, okay? So it shouldn't taste bitter, it should taste sour. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to have a couple heaping tablespoons of it on your plate. It satisfies that need for the sour flavor, whereas we need a little sweet, a little salty, a little bitter, a little spicy, and sour. Then we feel satisfied if we get all those flavors. And the probiotic factor is so wonderful for our bodies to have that cultured food in our diet regularly. So now that my hands are sterilized, I'm going to go ahead and put in about a half teaspoon here. This is another type of whole sea salt here. This is a pink Himalayan crystal sea salt. And your sea salt should be off color a little bit. Add a little bit more. And our yogurt whey here to help get the process going a little faster even. You might want to add a little tiny bit of water, maybe like 1/8 of a cup. You shouldn't have to. The salt over time, after mashing it and letting it sit for an hour, will pull the brine out of that cabbage pulp. So once we get our Ziploc bag in the jar, we may need to add a little tiny bit of water to the kraut to get it so it's completely underwater, but you shouldn't have to. Sometimes I do. And we can make 2 different sizes of this today. I chose to do the smaller size because it was quicker to do. But they say that the larger batch you have, like if you can do 5 gallons of sauerkraut and use 10 heads of cabbage, to make 5 gallons of it, the larger the batch, the more likely you will get that bacterial balance that you want going on. So I'm just taking my aggressions out on the kraut. And you can do this for about 3 minutes, really mixing in that sea salt and yogurt whey, really just pulverizing it. Look how much liquid is already coming out of it. Ooh, look at that. You can put grated carrot or bok choy or sea vegetable or oregano or garlic into your kraut. A real good combination is fresh oregano and garlic and a little carrot. So the cabbage is the main element, the main vegetable for your sauerkraut or kimchi that has that good lactobacteria in it that will get the process going. So kimchi is more spicy. I don't really know if they use a cayenne or another kind of pepper I bet there's a lot of different ways around the world that Asian countries use different pungent elements for their kimchi. But I think that Napa cabbage is the basis of most kimchis. But even some people put sea vegetable. They'll put soaked arame or kombu into their sauerkraut for trace minerals. So you can ferment any vegetables you want if the bulk of it is the cabbage. And I like to use white cabbage. I don't know if purple cabbage has less of the good bacteria we want or more of it, but I have done half and half before, so it came out kind of like a purple sauerkraut, and that was interesting. But I keep going back to just using the regular green cabbage, and always organic, of course. It's like, look at all this brine we're creating here. Wow, look at that. That's great. So you want to use the right amount of sea salt too. See, sea salt inhibits the bad bacteria, but it will let the good bacteria do its thing. So for this small batch, I added about 2/3 of a teaspoon of sea salt, but if you had a gallon glass jar, use a whole level teaspoon, but no more than that. And you can do sauerkraut without any sea salt at all. It's It's good to inhibit that bad bacteria with a little bit of sea salt though, I believe. Okay, so now I'm gonna just push this down into the bottom of the bowl and let it sit for an hour. And while we're letting it sit, we'll make our sweet cultured coriander cornbread. And I will put a nice towel over this so that flies don't get into it. So now that our sauerkraut is sitting to the side, to create a brine for an hour, I'm going to teach you how to make cultured coriander cornbread. And I'm going to use coconut oil. So this, at my house I have it in the fridge, and I took a few tablespoons of it and put it in this jar to bring here, but I do need it liquid, just like our honey. So I am going to throw it in the microwave for a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds. We'll get this liquid, but I'm going to use a chunk of it to butter our casserole dish. And you can use butter, you can use ghee, you can use high oleic safflower or sunflower oil. It's all up to you. I like the taste of it with coconut. So I'm just making sure all the sides are nice and buttered with coconut oil. So this is a 9 by 13 casserole dish. The culturing process. So remember I talked about in a previous video the importance of either soaking and sprouting or fermenting your grains. And when you have a flour or something like steel cut oats, whether it's already processed and chopped up, you need to neutralize the phytic acid that's in all whole grains. And phytic acid binds with minerals in our intestines and inhibits their absorption. So a lifetime of eating grains that we've skipped that step of sprouting or fermenting leads to degenerative bone loss and tooth decay. But this batch here has been sitting for 24 hours. The recipe is for a cup of cornmeal and a cup of any kind of whole grain flour you want to use. I used wheat flour, but you can use spelt flour if you're wheat intolerant. So I used a cup of each of those and about 3 or 4 tablespoons of yogurt, live plain yogurt with the good cultures in it. And I mixed it up maybe with a half a cup of water, maybe 3/4 of a cup, just until it got to the consistency that I could blend it all together and there were no dry patches of flour. Okay, so when those cultures are now in your cup of cornmeal and your cup of wheat flour or whatever kind of flour and blended together, I covered it with a dish towel and let it sit for 1 day. And when you get at it the next day, it's going to look like this, and there's going to be a little bit of liquid floating at the top. Can you see that? But that's fine. We're just going to mix this all together. So 2 things have happened in the culturing process. Those beneficial bacteria have pre-digested all the complex carbohydrates in there for us. So it's like sourdough. That's the process of making sourdough too. Those beneficial cultures have made the nutrients more assimilatable and easier for us to digest. And the texture is great. It comes out a little spongy and chewy, just like sourdough does. That's how our flours that we make breads out of should be for best health. So I'm going to go ahead and get this liquid in the microwave here. So I'm going to put it in there for maybe 5 or 10 seconds. I'm going to put our dry spices into our flour mixture here first. So I'm going to use about a ½ teaspoon of sea salt, but I'm going to use about a ½ teaspoon of nutmeg, 1 level teaspoon, so 1 teaspoon of coriander, ground coriander, and this is our baking soda and baking powder. It's a teaspoon of each. 1 teaspoon baking soda, 1 teaspoon baking powder. Blend in our dry ingredients before I add our honey and our oil. But same thing with the sweetener. You can use agave nectar, maybe a third of a cup of agave, or half a cup, or a quarter cup, whatever level of sweetness you can tolerate. Some honey. This is local raw honey. And I put this in the microwave too to get it liquidy, so it'll go in there real nice. So I'm using maybe a quarter cup, maybe a third of a cup. So I had to put my coconut oil in the microwave for about a minute to get it liquid again. But I'm also going to add our egg. So that was maybe a quarter cup of your oil. See, I don't measure things anymore. A lot of people need to really get it right, but if you make it 10-15 times, you get a good sense of about how much you want. And sometimes you may feel like having more oil in there, and sometimes maybe if it's summertime and you're getting away from heavier foods, you only want, a couple tablespoons of the safflower oil or sunflower oil, always unrefined. Okay, now I add a nice can of corn, drained. That's my own personal touch. Not a lot of cornbreads have fresh corn in there. You could use frozen corn too, or take a fresh corn on the cob and use a knife and get very fresh corn kernels out of it. This looks heavenly. So I'm going to bake this. This one is a little liquidy, so I can tell it's going to take about half hour or 35 minutes at 350. But if it's thicker in a consistency, you may only need 20 minutes. So keep checking it. You want your wooden, like a skewer for making shish kebabs, or your toothpick to come out clean. Okay, so I'm going to put this in the oven for about a half hour. So those are some ideas on culturing your own flours. You can do it with steel-cut oats. This is very exciting. A couple tablespoons of plain cultured yogurt into a cup or so of steel-cut oats. Right in the saucepan you're going to cook it the next day in. And about a cup of water. Just get it to the consistency where you can get it all together and there's no more dry parts. And let it sit for 24 hours. And then the next day when you go to cook your steel-cut oats, they require a little more water. I think it's about 2 parts water to 1 part grain. So if you used 2 cups of steel-cut oats initially, you use another 4 cups of water. So you want quite a bit of water because you're going to let that steel-cut oats, you're going to mix it all up and set it on low. Well, bring it to a boil first and then put it on low for a good half hour. Let that simmer. You may want to stir it every now and then. I add sea salt in the beginning of cooking grains because it helps enhance the cooking of grain. But steel-cut oats is a wonderful, wonderful food. They say the oils in the oats have not gone rancid to the degree that rolled oats have. So that's why lately people into health and healing have been into steel-cut oats as opposed to the rolled oats. Today I wanted to talk about 2 concepts: vitamin-mineral assimilation through food and storing your foods with oils in them. So that would be your oils, nuts, seeds, in glass containers, preferably out of the heat and light. So somewhere low in the pantry in glass airtight containers, because heat, light, and air are the 3 elements that will denature oils over time or make them they oxidize or rancidify. So those are some strategies for storing your nuts and seeds and oils. And talking about nuts, I wanted to talk about a calcium absorption breakfast strategy and an iron absorption breakfast strategy. Because when you're getting your nutrients through food and in the combinations of minerals with each other that help assimilation, the body, that's the best way for the body to really uptake minerals, is when it's in food state and when you do it in certain combinations. And what those combinations are is you want to eat calcium foods with magnesium foods and iron foods with vitamin C foods. And you keep those meals separate because calcium and iron repel each other. So ideally, we'd have brown rice, which is a very high magnesium food, but it's not real high in iron or vitamin C. Vitamin C is something also I think that you want to stay away from when you have your calcium magnesium combinations in either breakfast or afternoons. But and so this is a concept I learned from something called solar nutrition. It's about eating certain foods at certain times a day to maximize vitamin mineral assimilation and cleanse organs and maintain overall health through diet and lifestyle. It's a great philosophy, and you can look it up online. There's several different people who've summarized it and given information on the internet about it. They say that plant sources of calcium are superior to dairy sources of calcium for the body, for how we can use calcium, right? So nuts that are high in calcium are Brazil nuts, cashews, and almonds are the three that are higher in calcium than any other nutrient in the nut, right? And I don't know offhand what iron nuts are, but I would guess the darker in color, the more iron they have, like black walnuts. But you want to eat those calcium nuts with your brown rice, and then the fruits that go with that, banana or pear, with that calcium absorption breakfast. I seem to do fine combining fruits in the morning with a grain. Some people get gurgly digestion, a lot of gas. If that happens, you probably want to keep fruits separate, which is one of the principles of food combining. If I wanted an iron absorption breakfast, I would have any other grain, and the grains that are high in iron are amaranth and millet. Those are the two that are real high in iron. But I would have maybe the pecans and walnuts, and prunes, and a vitamin C source. So prunes or dried figs are both real high in iron and manganese, but the fruits that go with those that are real high in vitamin C for iron assimilation are kiwi, pineapple. I think mango is pretty high in vitamin C as well, but I always buy kiwis. I just keep kiwis on hand for my breakfast when I decide to have iron, nuts, and prunes with my whole grain. Okay, and so if we're talking about the afternoon time foods, unhulled sesame seeds are very high in calcium. A quarter cup of unhulled sesame seeds is something like 40% of your daily value of calcium. So in the afternoon, if you want to have unhulled sesame seeds or wakame, or maybe even a cup of plain cultured yogurt with your brown rice in the afternoon, that's a great combination for calcium absorption in the afternoon. If you wanted to do iron, you could have any of your iron foods. That'd be beef or liver or black beans. Hijiki, sea vegetable, very high in iron. It's known as the strong one. And your iron grains, the millet or amaranth with tomato or peppers or powdered cayenne, is off the charts in vitamin C. So iron foods with vitamin C foods and magnesium foods with calcium foods. And when you're eating your magnesium and calcium combination, stay away from iron and vitamin C in that meal. So you can call me if you have any questions about that. 547-9073. Oh, area code 805. Our cabbage has been sitting for an hour, creating a brine. We're going to sterilize our hands again. I sterilized my hands, a little bit of soap and grapefruit seed extract or antibacterial soap, and I just went ahead and sterilized the outside of our Ziploc bag, which will be in the jar on top of the kraut with water in it, helping hold the kraut down underneath its own liquid. So I'm just going to set this carefully over here and start pushing our kraut. Oh my gosh, this is beautiful. Look at this. Oh, look at all that liquid. Oh, it's so lovely. So what I do is I just try to get like a little softball sized, depends on how big the hole in your jar is, but systematically get all of it in there. I'm pushing it all down so it as little air as possible into this compact ferment. Couple more handfuls of kraut in here. So this was 2 medium-sized heads of cabbage that filled a half-gallon glass jar. But if you have a gallon glass jar, which is the size I like to do, because if you're going to invest an hour and a half into making kraut, it does take that long because of the sterilization. You have to scrub everything, you know. It takes about an hour and a half. I like to make a gallon at a time, but for the sake of the video and you know, time constraints here, I just did a half gallon today. We want all that liquid in there too. Okay. Okay, so see how we're not going to have to add any water to this because it created so much brine that our kraut is going to sit nicely underneath its own liquid, which is definitely what you want. And I'm pushing, trying to just get it compact, really pushing it down in there. And when I sterilize this jar, I sterilize the outside of the jar as well because I knew I was going to be touching it. So now, plastic bag, put a little bit of water in there. Okay, so what I want to accomplish is getting the bag to conform to the inside of the jar so that all that kraut is being held down underneath its own liquid. And it's a little confusing to look at because there's the water inside the bag and then there's the water in the jar, right? But that water level in the jar should come up just about to the top, and you don't want that water level as it evaporates out and as it's culturing for a week or 2 weeks, depending on the temperature of your kitchen, you don't want this water level to get down to the level of the kraut. So you may need to pull the bag aside and add, you know, a quarter cup of fresh filtered water to it after about 3 or 4 days. If you see that water level getting down below the kraut, it needs to stay underwater. So even though it's not done fermenting yet, you might need to add water to it. If you had a bigger jar and the level of the kraut it only came up to about 2/3 or 3/4 to the top of the jar, that's perfect because then you have plenty of room to get that kraut pushed down underneath its own liquid and not worry so much about it evaporating out. Because we're working with a smaller jar here and our kraut is all the way to the top, I know that I'm going to have to add more water to it in a few days. Now, what I do with my 1 gallon is I put this nice big and I scrub this just in case the bag leaks. I did scrub it with antibacterial soap. Yeah. So that's okay. It's not ideal, but we have, oh. So you have to be careful of that too. So that's why I'll zip up our bag now. And you don't want to cover it tight. You want it to be able to expand and breathe, but you want to store this on a plate or some kind of container where as the kraut will expand over the next couple of days and it'll try to push more of that water out, but so it'll overflow a little bit. So you can just, you know, a little clip right here would be nice and neat. But just make sure that kraut is pushed down underneath its own liquid, and then you'll start to smell it in about a week's time. If it's real warm, if it's like 90 degrees in your kitchen, it'll happen in about 3 days. But if it's more like 70 degrees, it takes about 2 weeks to 3 weeks. So there's your sauerkraut. give me a call if you have any questions. I've done this several times, and it doesn't turn out every time, but it turns out most of the time. And I had a lot of questions for the person who taught me how to do it. So I welcome your phone calls. I'll talk to you for 10 or 15 minutes, even a half hour if you need. 805-547-9073. Thanks so much.